Welcome into the PFF podcast. Steve Palazzolo here with Sam Monson. We're going to be reviewing preseason week 2, all sorts of fun action. And before we dive in, though, I want to remind you guys about my new favorite way to play fantasy football. It is called Draft. That's all you have to search in the App Store to access it. Just search Draft or go to playdraft.com, and you have the opportunity to win real money playing fantasy football. It's really cool. It's called a best ball format. All you have to do is draft your team, and that is it. So you just leave it. You draft your team. You don't have to worry about waiver wire trades. You don't have to worry about injuries. They're going to take your best players every single week. You put up a little bit of money, and you have a chance to win real money back. So it's pretty cool, and I love it because it's pretty quick, easy to draft if you want to. Sam was just talking about the fast draft with me before we got on here. And you can do a draft in under an hour. Just fly right through it. You can do a slow draft as well if you'd like. Games start every few minutes. You just jump in the league, you draft, set it, and forget it. So it's the type of thing you can have multiple teams. I'll probably have about 10 teams going this year. So it's a lot of fun. It's over at playdraft.com or search draft in the App Store. And if you guys sign up today, make your first deposit, you will get a free $3 game. All you have to do is use the promo code PFF. That's just PFF, promo code. You get a free $3 game over at Draft or playdraft.com. All right, Sam, we're talking preseason week 2 action. We got to reiterate, with preseason, we're not looking at wins and losses. We're looking at the individual players. I think some of the bigger things, the new schemes, the new coaches, how are those things going to interact? You can get a little bit of a feel for a team, but anything major that stood out to you this week, whether it's individual player style, we can go a number of different ways with this, but kick us off. What do you want to talk about after preseason week 2?
Yeah, we said it before. The results don't matter in preseason, but the games do. The games absolutely matter, and more importantly, the individual performances within the games matter, because that's how you're going to look at guys. So, yeah, I think the biggest story this week was the return of Jaylons Smith. Dallas Cowboys number 2 draft pick a year ago, linebacker out of Notre Dame, seen by everybody as one of the best prospects in the entire draft until the knee injury sustained in his final bowl game at Notre Dame. And it was a really bad knee injury, not just the kind that, a standard, if you like, ACL tear that puts you out for the year and then you're back more or less 100%. Jaylons Smith was bad. It looked to be a permanent, I guess, degenerative problem. He was suffering from drop foot or foot drop. I've seen that put both ways, which is where the structural components of your knee won't actually keep your foot pointing upwards anymore. It just consistently drops, and you actually need like a brace or something to prevent that from happening. But anyway, he's been battling back from injury since he's been with the Dallas Cowboys, and we finally saw him on the field in live action.
Yeah, and he's a guy that relied so much on his speed at Notre Dame. I think when you look at watching him, I used to call him like the Madden glitch. He would just get from one spot to the next so quickly, fly to the football. I thought he still had some work to do against the run, taking on blockers and everything, but you talk about a speed linebacker that can cover. I thought he had a couple plays that looked okay, got some good depth in zone and closed quickly on a short pass early on. What'd you think about just getting on the field was a big first step for him, but anything else that maybe stood out to you about his actual performance?
Yeah, I mean, his college splash plays were phenomenal. And I think I used this line at the time, and I'm pretty sure I stole it from somebody, but I'm going to roll with it again. I think people were in love with the idea of Jaylons Smith far more than they were in love with the actual player, Jaylons Smith, in terms of looking at the tape and what, it was more about what he could be as opposed to what he actually was. I don't know. I looked at this tape, and it's a really small sample size. We're talking like, I don't know, how many snaps did he play? 14 or something?
Yep.
First get action back, a year after being on the shelf. I thought he looked a little bit stiff. There was still a lot of very good straight line speed, and he did make that nice stop in the pass game. But I thought he looked a little bit stiff, a little bit struggled a little bit with changing direction against the run, came downhill a couple of times, and just kind of like a car understeering, just sort of, washed his way into his gap and never really was able to change direction and follow the running back. So
nicely said.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how he does, next week and going forward, and see if he can build on this week on week. But for the moment, Jaylon Smith's brother is a far better football player than Jaylon Smith, which is probably the first time that's been said in quite a number of years.
Tell me about him, Sam.
Well, we talked about him last week. Rod Smith, running back for the Dallas Cowboys as well. They're both playing on the same team. He was the guy that we mentioned, which had flashed a little bit behind Alfred Morris and behind Darren McFadden. I think that Alfred Morris is the best running back in that stable, and McFadden is a guy that can be made to look good by that offensive line. But the way Rod Smith is running the ball, I would forget about Darren McFadden entirely and roll with some kind of combination of McFadden or of Alfred Morris and Rod Smith until Zeke Elliott gets back, because he was running the ball hard, getting significant yards after contact. He slimmed down a lot. He's lost a lot of weight from back when he was a fullback, and he's actually breaking tackles, making athletic plays with the ball in his hands. I thought he looked really good.
He had that one run that may have made its rounds on social media. Really good run, jukes, breaking tackles, and then finished it by destroying a defensive back at the second level.
He's a big back. He's a big guy.
He looks really good. And look, I watched that game pretty closely, going through with the grading and everything. There might not be a bigger mismatch in all of football than the Dallas Cowboys offensive line going up against the Indianapolis Colts pass rush. It was ugly. You're talking about the Cowboys, who we know are one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. The Colts got less pressure than any team in the NFL last year on a per-play basis. Some of the pockets Dak Prescott was working with were just absurd. He had so much real estate to maneuver. The other guy I do want to highlight, if you guys go back to was it last week or the NFC East preview, we talked about Jonathan Cooper, left guard for the Dallas Cowboys. He's one of those guys you talk about. Dallas is locked in with elite players at 3 out of 5 spots on the offensive line. Left guard is wide open, and then right tackle you have La'el Collins. Left guard, Cooper looked really, really good, especially in the run game. He was getting to the second level. You're talking about this offensive line. If they do get more consistent play like that from Cooper, who finally could potentially live up to his hype, that's going to be a massive story. Just something to keep an eye on, because we did mention it last week, and he's coming off a great game and was PFF Team of the Week member. Yeah,
and the other part of that is La'el Collins had another good week. So this is now a few games with La'el Collins at right tackle, and there have been no problems. If anything, he has looked like a better right tackle than he ever was a left guard, which in and of itself is good news. But yeah, Jonathan Cooper played well. They kept him in almost the entire game. He played 56 snaps against the Colts, which was...
He did some of his damage against the second team, I'll say that.
Yeah, which was 9 more than anyone else on the team
on
offense. But they also had him moonlighting at center as well. So that, I think, is the best kind of sign for him in terms of they're trying to get some position flexibility out of him. So
giving him a shot.
Yeah, so that he's going to be on this roster because they can use him at multiple different spots. Even if he doesn't end up panning out a guard, they can use him as a backup guard and center. So I think just in terms of being on the roster, he's pretty safe. But yeah, that game in particular was a good sign for his progress or his prospects at left guard. But like you said, or we said before, if La'el Collins is fine at right tackle, Cooper can be anything. I mean, they don't need him to be anything more than terrible, and they're fine.
Just get as close to average as you possibly can, and it'll be a win.
It's what we all shoot for.
Yes, we do. Mediocrity is the goal every day. Just to wrap it up on the Cowboys real quick, if Jaylons Smith can get back to some semblance of what he was at Notre Dame, and again, it's just great to see him on the field. Jaylons Smith, Sean Lee, potentially in that linebacking core, and we've talked about all of the guys that they've drafted from Chidobe Awuzie, Xavier Woods, Jordan Lewis, and then having Byron Jones back there. All of those guys can play in the slot, safety, do all these different things. Dallas in that versatile defense, that athletic defense, it might take time for them to come together, but I do love the way they're moving as far as how they're building that defense, especially in the back seven.
Yeah, and that combination, even if you just limit that to Sean Lee and Jaylon Smith, I mean, that could be something special.
Absolutely.
If those two guys get, if both of them are healthy at the same time, which is a pretty big caveat, I guess, with those two.
That's true. Both guys with some injury concerns. Let's move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a minute. They're one of the bigger stories in the NFL now, and I know it's Jacksonville, and people like to say it's the small market and nobody cares, but people care.
QB competition.
Quarterback competition does matter. Blake Bortles goes out and looks pretty bad. He looks pretty bad again. He looks like he's got the yips, like a baseball pitcher. Sam, I know you don't do baseball. You ever seen a baseball pitcher who just cannot throw a strike?
No, but I've seen golfers with the same thing.
Yeah.
You can't
Charles
hit the ball.
Barkley.
No matter what is, well, no. Charles Barkley, I think, has got a different problem.
Different
with his golf swing. But you see guys that they just can't connect with the ball. I don't think professional golfers as much, but it certainly happened with me where I have not been able to connect with the ball properly.
You comparing your golf game to Blake Bortles quarterbacking.
Yeah. And given that I no longer play golf, that I think is probably quite apt.
And that is why Chad Henne is actually in the mix in this quarterback competition. And I know you want to throw a third name in the ring. Before we do that, though, let's just set the table. Bortles, last year in year 3, really did struggle. I don't think he really has the yips as far as, a guy that has the yips it's like every throw. It's bad. There are definitely certain times where Bortles just has indecision. I think the throw that was going around was that underthrow to Allen Robinson last week. Allen Robinson has more than a step on the cornerback, and it was just grossly underthrown. My colleague Zach Robinson, who on the Big Time Throwcast, talks about Bortles just not knowing how to pace the ball on deep balls, when to throw the deep ball, when to throw it with touch, when to throw the back shoulder. He just looks off. And it's so bad that Doug Marrone, after the game, this doesn't happen in preseason, Sam.
No.
After the game, basically said, hey, the quarterback competition is open. Chad Henne is in there. Marrone just talked about those two guys, Blake Bortles and Chad Henne, but the number 3 quarterback, Brandon Allen, second year out of Arkansas, looking really good so far in the preseason.
I think Brandon Allen is the best quarterback on that roster right now. I mean, and Marrone later did not shut the door on him as part of that quarterback competition. I mean, as much as he kind of did that later, at the time, he just spent the entire press conference or interview talking about the 2 quarterbacks. So I think in his head, it's a two-way competition, even if he's playing lip service to the idea that Brandon Allen could force his way into there. But if you look at how these 3 guys are playing, like Brandon Allen, if nothing else, if you've got this far after the second week of the preseason, you're saying, okay, this is a disaster. We need to do something. And now this is a live competition, which effectively is a desperation move. I mean, the Jaguars have spent all offseason saying Blake Bortles is our guy. We're going to try and rebuild him. We're going to get the confidence back and go forward.
And then 2 preseason
games in, you're like, okay, forget that. It's a wide open competition. Please, somebody step forward and win this job. That's basically what they're doing. That is an absolute desperation move. At which point, desperate times calls for desperate measures. Let's give Brandon Allen some looks with the first team because he's the only quarterback on that roster that has looked good so far. I mean, he completed 10 of 14 passes for 144 yards and a touchdown late in that game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He fit one pass into D.D. Westbrook down the seam, which was into a tiny window.
Yes.
And he looked good. And I'm not saying this guy is an all-pro quarterback or anything, but when you're at the point where you're basically throwing both of your starters or both of your top 2 quarterbacks under the bus and saying, neither of these guys looks capable of leading my team at the moment, why would you not look at the one guy on the roster that has looked capable of doing that, albeit with the third team?
So far, 4 for 5, 98 yards on passes thrown, beyond 10 yards for Brandon Allen. And, he's a guy who came out of Arkansas in the 2016 draft, graded very well in our system, came from a pro-style system. Like you said, I don't know that he's a future Pro Bowler or anything like that. We looked at him as a solid backup and a potential starter. But, you know what you're getting from Chad Henne at this point. And while there was still kind of that hope that Blake Bortles would be able to recapture some of that 2015 magic when he was at least serviceable. He was still a guy that would make some bad decisions, but, be able to throw the ball up to Allen Robinson in bounds to catch it. There was also that clip going around where he throws the ball out of bounds during practice, and Allen Robinson's like, come on, man, keep it in bounds, give me a play. And then game time comes, and he underthrows it, doesn't give him a chance. I mean, Bortles is off right now. Henne, you know what he is. I'd be interested to see what could happen if Brandon Allen at least got a shot with those teeny little hands. He's only got the 9-inch hands.
Hey, leave people with small hands alone. There's nothing wrong with that.
Hey, he stretched them out during draft time.
We're people too.
He improved his hand size from the Senior Bowl to the NFL Combine, a sign of Brandon Allen's
I'll find out what workout
dedication.
regimen he was on.
While we're still talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars, I want to highlight 2 players real quick. Dante Fowler, former first-round pick, and Sheldon Day, interior pass rusher. Sheldon Day was extremely disruptive against Tampa Bay, against the run, and as a pass rusher, just getting off the ball really quickly, blowing things up in the backfield. And Dante Fowler maybe had his best game as a pro. And again, you take this all with a grain of salt, but you're looking for any positive you can have. And Jacksonville's got some pieces along the defensive front. If these 2 guys, Fowler and Day, come along, it's only going to help that depth.
Well, this was the Sheldon Day that I was expecting to see in the NFL after his college career. This guy that is just a really good, disruptive, penetrating, quick defensive lineman that whether it's run or pass, he's going to be in the backfield, making a mess of things. And it hasn't really happened yet. Part of it is because they've barely played the guy, which is, it's not like they've had a defensive line that's, been absolutely dominant and there's no space for snaps there. I think there's no reason he should have only played 200 snaps last season. But yeah, this was the Sheldon Day that we saw at Notre Dame that was just a wrecking machine inside and a constant force against either the run or the pass. So I'm hoping that's, turn the light on for him a little bit and maybe signal to that coaching staff that he does need more snaps.
Yeah, if nothing else, to just add to that rotation. You have different types of players with Malik Jackson, with Calais Campbell. See what Sheldon Day can do. Let's move on to the Los Angeles Rams, and another one of the bigger stories, starting with quarterback Jared Goff, who is coming off of, by all accounts, no matter which way you slice it, a very bad rookie season. He played poorly. The scheme wasn't good. The personnel around him wasn't good, both offensive line and playmakers. But you saw Goff, week 1 only had a couple throws, 2 series, but he looked really comfortable Saturday night against the Oakland Raiders. And I always come back to that word comfort, right? Last year it was fidgety. He was just late seeing the field and just looked like a rookie, looked like an overwhelmed rookie. But Saturday night, it was a little bit more of the Cal Jared Goff, who wasn't shying away from pressure, was maneuvering the pocket, was finding the open man, had a couple key plays, had that deep touchdown to your boy, Cooper Kupp, who is leading the NFL in wide receiver rating, passer rating when targeting him so far here in the preseason. We'll talk about Kupp in a second. But Goff's under pressure, and he creates a little bit of room. Even though it was a coverage bust and Kupp was wide open, Goff did a nice job under pressure, creating that room. What are your thoughts on Goff? I mean, is it just all Sean McVay and this new system, or is it in part, we thought he was going to progress anyway here in year 2?
Yeah, I mean, real signs of life from Goff. I think that touchdown was a great example because, he was, 10 yards open? And it was a throw that if you just stand the guy where Goff released that ball, either me or you would expect to complete that touchdown.
Right, in theory, it's easy.
But what he had to do to get himself into that position, it was a kind of bootleg out to that side. There was an unblocked defender. He had to quickly adjust, pull up, set his feet, and get the ball away, and got it where it needed to go. And he didn't look flustered doing that. It was just natural. I think that's a big kind of step forward from year 1 where nothing looked natural. Everything looked panicked, like fidgety, that was the word you used, all that stuff. It just didn't look like a guy who was happy being out there and doing what he does. That touchdown, I think, was a great example of a guy who was just set. He just knew exactly what he was doing, and he delivered a bunch of passes like that in this game. So again, we're into the realm of small sample sizes, but we've now seen legitimate signs of life from Jared Goff, who ultimately was a number 1 overall pick. This is a guy we expected to be good, especially a number 1 overall pick coupled with really good PFF college grading. This is a guy we expected to have talent. In particular, you and Neil Hornsby with the Jared Goff jersey, waiting to break it out of the closet. But yeah, with signs of life, this guy might actually have it still.
Neil bought it for me.
Yeah.
I accept gifts. Neil's a big Jared Goff fan.
He is.
He just really liked him as a player.
As were you.
I'm a big Jared Goff fan, too.
Yeah.
The thing I always come back to, I struggled a little bit with his upside because I don't know if he was ever going to be a top 5 guy, but I thought he'd be a good NFL starter. So he still has a chance to do that. Let's talk about his playmakers for a second. We'll talk about Cooper Kupp. Sammy Watkins made his debut, 33 snaps there. I don't think anything particularly notable there. But Kupp's looking great as a rookie. And the other guy I think you have to highlight, Gerald Everett, the tight end, who second-round pick, always graded well in our system. He had 2 straight years, Sam. You call him a tight end. He's a tight end / slot in college. Led all tight ends, though, in forced missed tackles. Averaged about 9 yards after the catch last year. Comparisons to Jordan Reed, comparisons to Aaron Hernandez coming out, and you get those a lot. But if you saw the play the other night, I threw a video of it up on Twitter. It was another play where Goff did a nice job maneuvering in the pocket, little dump off, and then once you get the ball into Everett's hands, he looks like a wide receiver. Really good athlete, really smooth. So you have him doing that. You have Cooper Kupp, who's doing exactly what we saw last year, even though it was FCS competition. Did the same thing at the Senior Bowl against better competition. Knows how to use his hands to get open. It's good footwork, really good route runner. He's getting open. You've got an interesting group of weapons now for the Rams with varying skill sets. They're going to make Goff's development that much easier.
Yeah, Cooper Kupp, I think, is just really good at everything that's hard to teach a wide receiver to do. So he's almost like the opposite of Sammy Watkins. You know, Sammy Watkins has the amazing athleticism and the stuff that, the stuff that you literally can't teach. You either have it or you don't. You just have that athletic skill set or that athletic profile, but is not particularly good at any other part of being a wide receiver. Cooper Kupp is excellent at all of the other parts of being a wide receiver, but just isn't quite the athlete that Sammy Watkins is. So they're an interesting combination in that regard. But I think that's why Kupp can come in from the FCS, basically start from day one. I mean, he's already going to be their starter, I think. I don't think it's going to be long before he's occupying the other position along with Sammy Watkins. I just don't think that Robert Woods is going to keep Cooper Kupp on the bench. Plus, you can use him inside. You can use him outside. He will run deep. He can run shallow stuff. He's an exceptionally polished route runner, has good hands. He's just a good wide receiver. And I think he's a really good, people talk about tight ends being a great safety blanket for a young quarterback. I think just having a reliable receiver like Cooper Kupp, who you know exactly what he's going to do, he's going to be where he's supposed to be, is really going to help Goff's development.
I mean, getting open still, the most important thing for the receiver?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you have to catch the ball when it gets there, but
that'll help.
You have to get open. And sometimes fast guys aren't as good at getting open. And I don't want to say that the Senior Bowl and being there watching Kupp in person sealed the deal for me, but it certainly made me feel more confident in our evaluation of Kupp when you see him going up against the Jordan Lewises of the world, the Desmond Kings of the world, and he made all of it, especially Jordan Lewis. They went head-to-head quite a bit. Talked about him earlier, Cowboys cornerback. Didn't matter. Kupp was so good at getting open in those one-on-ones and throughout the week. So I think you're right. I think he's going to see plenty of time.
I think it was significant that every time he was asked to step up against FBS competition, Division I guys,
dominated
completely. I mean, if you extrapolate his numbers just against the FBS teams out over a season, they're farcical. They're absolutely ridiculous. So every time he has been asked to step up in competition throughout his career, whether it's FBS, whether it's Senior Bowl, and now preseason, he's looked good. So the strength of competition thing is definitely a concern anytime a guy. But this is a guy that broke Jerry Rice's records, in the FCS. It's not like he just was relatively dominant. I mean, this is a guy that set all-time numbers in college. So, it's definitely a question mark. But it's once you're so far better than everybody else, there's a point at which you say, okay, this is very unlikely not to translate.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And again, coming out of that small school, you want to see domination, and that's absolutely what he did. All right, another quarterback competition that is no longer a competition. That's over. The Denver Broncos. They named Trevor Siemian the starting quarterback this week over 2016 first-round pick Paxton Lynch. Now, I think coming into the season, Siemian versus Lynch, I think objectively it was fair to say Siemian, although he wasn't, again, he's not a Pro Bowl quarterback, but he looked half decent for a former seventh rounder last season. He was reasonable, and he looked better than Paxton Lynch last year. The hope was that Paxton Lynch, who they invested a first-round pick in, would take the job, right? Would he be the guy? He's the toolsy guy. He's supposed to take that big step in year two. He gets a chance with the starters on Saturday night, and it did not go well. He was 9 for 13, which sounds good on paper, but only 39 yards. That's 3 yards per attempt. Now up to 3.7 yards per attempt in the preseason. and didn't have any interceptions, but threw a couple that easily coulda, woulda, should have been. Bad decisions, missing passes, a little bit late. What'd you think of Paxton and this decision to go with Trevor Siemian?
Completed nothing over 10 yards down the field in this game. Yeah, I mean, so this was basically Denver's shot to say, okay, Paxton Lynch, show us that you can still be in this competition. You know, the whole competition in Denver, it's been a weird one. It's like, we have Trevor Siemian, but for the love of God, Paxton Lynch, show us a reason not to go with him again this season.
Right.
And that's been the entire offseason for them. And so far, at every single turn, Paxton Lynch has not shown them anything. And this was like the last gasp. We'll put him out there with the first team. If he shows something good, this is still a live competition. And frankly, he's going to win the job because that's how it's going to go. And he looked terrible. I mean, he looked no better than he was a year ago. Nothing good came from this game, and they just went, yeah, okay, we're going to have to go with Trevor Siemian again. I'm sorry. And, you know, somebody tweeted out the other day, Field Yates, I think it was, a list of quarterbacks taken since 2006 that had not assumed the starting position by year 2. And it is not a good list to be on. It's
Sounds like Brady Quinn.
Yeah, Tim Tebow, Johnny Manziel. There was another one in there, and now Paxton Lynch is on that list. And now a couple of people pointed out that if you take it back one more year, you get Aaron Rodgers, which is fair, but Rodgers is the anomaly there as opposed to anything else. I mean, he's a guy that was sitting behind a Hall of Famer who was playing games with retirement. Like,
right.
There was no Hall of Famer keeping Tim Tebow on the bench. There was no Hall of
Kyle Orton.
There's no Hall of Famer keeping Paxton Lynch sitting on the bench.
Trevor Siemian.
Trevor Siemian, for all his qualities, is not Brett Favre. So that is not encouraging. You know, at this point, more than ever, quarterbacks now show quickly if they can deal with the NFL. And if you haven't been able to show anything by year 2, and really all he would have needed to do is to show anything.
Right.
And he'd have taken the job from Trevor Siemian. Like, if you haven't shown anything by now, I think the Denver Broncos have to seriously be thinking now that we have no quarterback and we need one.
Who should they go get, Sam?
They should go get Tyrod.
Tyrod, who's actually looked probably as bad as any quarterback this preseason so far. But you also have 2 years of at least solid, real NFL play under your belt if you're Tyrod. We'll talk a little bit more about him on the Big Time Throwcast version of the PFF podcast. I'll be diving in a little bit deeper with Zach Robinson about Paxton's game. And Zach has some pretty strong feelings about Trevor Siemian and his strengths and his weaknesses because he has both. Let's talk about Denver as a whole real quick. We've talked about their defense this year and my quote-unquote fear that they're not going to be as aggressive without Wade Phillips there, and they're going to be a little bit more zone-heavy, even though they're extremely talented. So I'm expecting maybe a slight regression on defense this year without Wade Phillips. And then you look offensively, you know, Trevor Siemian, I think he's a guy that if the game plan just matches up right, he can do some damage for you. But if it's, when he has to adjust on the fly, it's just not always there. I'm a little worried about Denver as a whole, despite the talented defense. A lot of talent in the AFC West. Is Denver even a playoff team this year for you?
Probably not. I mean, they are slipping backwards. Like, that's why they need a quarterback. You know, they don't have a team that can be carried by the defense that carried Peyton Manning to a second Super Bowl. They don't. That defense is not as good as it was then, and they need a quarterback that can be better than Peyton Manning was that year, which isn't a high bar to clear. I mean, Peyton Manning was not good that year. The guy got benched for Brock Osweiler, essentially, and then, reinstated into the lineup. But they don't need a good quarterback. They just need one better than the ones they have. My big concern as well is that not only is Trevor Siemian a limited quarterback with plenty of his own problems, that offensive line looks like it's going to be a problem as well. They're rolling into the season with both the problem tackles from last year still there in terms of Donald Stevenson and Ty Sambrailo. Now, neither of them may start, but the guys replacing them are first-round pick Garrett Bowles on the left side and Menelik Watson on the right side. Now, Watson's looked okay in preseason, but who knows what he's going to be. Let's leave him aside for a minute, though. But Garrett Bowles has not looked particularly good so far in preseason, and this was a guy that...
First-round pick. And
yeah. But the big thing on him coming out was the pass protection part of it was the weaker area. That's where he was raw. That's where he needed the work. and that's where he's been struggling badly so far. He's, just against San Francisco, he allowed a couple of quarterback hurries, but he was flagged 4 times. He jumped offside once, and he was flagged 3 times for holding.
He had 1 million penalties last year at Utah as well,
Yeah.
so that's continued. Yep.
So, this is going to be an issue, whether he's getting Trevor Siemian killed from blindside pressure or whether he's just putting that offense behind the 8 ball with a series of 10-yard penalties that they can't overcome. That's going to be a problem for this offense because, Trevor Siemian is not the kind of quarterback that can deal with being put behind the chains too much.
I think we talked about it on the AFC West preview. If you're not getting better, you're getting worse in the NFL. And the Broncos, it's the time of year where every team's probably feeling a little optimistic and you feel like whatever moves you made this offseason were the right ones. I feel like Denver's that one team that just doesn't have those tangible moves that say, yes, we're moving forward. Therefore, I think that stagnation works against
the Bowles pick was really interesting because they took him above Ryan Ramczyk. They took him above where most people thought he was going to go, and it's a real kind of balls out decision where it's like, we are 100% confident in this guy. We're taking him here because that's where we pick, and to hell with what everyone else thinks.
Yep.
The problem is, if it turns out everyone else was right, you're going to look really bad for doing that.
Well, a lot of people liked Bowles. A lot of people liked him as a first-round pick and thought that he was a good pass protector. Certainly known for his run blocking at Utah. Only had the 1 year of FBS experience. So that was an issue as well. But he was that guy that offensive line coaches love because he says he wants to destroy everybody on every play as a run blocker, but that same aggressiveness got him into trouble as a pass protector. We're seeing that so far in the preseason. So he's a question mark. And it was just that one of those pure need picks. We know we need to tackle. We know the offensive line's bad. We're going to get the need pick right now, and we're going to get Bowles.
His story is great. He's come from a pretty troubled background. He's overcome a lot. He's the kind of guy who you can see exactly why people would be sold on him, between the background story and the idea that he wants to kill everyone every single play. But that doesn't actually mean he's a particularly good player. And so far he's struggling. He needs a lot of work to become the player that coaches want him to be. And I'm not saying he can't get there, but I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains from Garrett Bowles, certainly in year 1. And this Denver team doesn't need that.
Yep, I'm with you there, man. All right, let's talk some Cleveland Browns. We've been talking a lot about the Browns on this podcast, but
hell yeah,
Brownies. We're going to convince our listeners they're going to be an exciting team this year. We're going to start with the quarterback. We're going to finish with that defense, though.
This is the time to get on the bandwagon before everyone else is on.
This is the time to get on the Cleveland bandwagon. So get your Browns gear. Not because they're locked in at quarterback. It's a curious move right now at quarterback. They're basically trying to say, is this the opposite of Denver? Right? Denver's like, come on, please, Paxton Lynch, please win the job. And Cleveland's like, all right, Brock, it's your job. Just don't lose it too badly. It's your job. We haven't found a real reason to give it to you, but we're going to give it to you anyway. The thing I'm curious about, I think everybody agrees Deshaun Kaiser, their rookie, is the most talented quarterback on the roster. But I think when you look at Cody Kessler versus Brock Osweiler straight up, Kessler's been the better quarterback when they've had an opportunity to play. Kessler looked better last year, looks better so far in the preseason. He's more accurate. He doesn't have a great arm, but it's not like Brock Osweiler. Brock Osweiler is 6'7" with a poo arm as well. So so here's the thing. Ultimately, I think they want Kaiser to be the guy. And, he took a step back in week 2, his second outing here. But why is Brock Osweiler just locked in as the starter and Cody Kessler is not even in the discussion right now?
I don't even understand why he's still on the roster. They signed him in that kind of...
Yeah, we thought they were just going to flip him
in
and
that
release
cheap deal
him
with the Houston Texans where they were paid to take him away. And, even if... So I can understand not getting rid of him straight away, although that would have been hilarious. But I get the idea of, well, we've paid for this guy. We might as well take him into camp and see what there's there. The Broncos thought he could be the guy. Let's see. But they've seen, and it's still not there. So why is he still on the roster? Get rid of him now because he's not doing you any good. If you just look at his numbers, they're ridiculous. He's got a quarterback rating of 43.3 this preseason when he's kept clean in the pocket. That's abysmal.
That's not good.
And it gets worse when you pressure him. So there's no upside in Brock Osweiler except the fact that he's 6'7". And last night, even you came around to the idea that being tall is not all there is to being a quarterback.
It's true. Sometimes height's overrated, Sam. I hate to admit it. Sometimes it is.
At the point where Steve is writing off your height, it's time to give it up. So I have no idea.
As a 6'10" male, though, I do, a 6'8" to 6'10" male, I do empathize with Brock, who's only about, 26 years old?
If that.
Those tall guys we don't reach our peak until we're 28 or 29. You got to have patience with Brock. We'll figure out that throwing motion and everything.
1990. He's soon to be 27.
Yes, he's 26. So you gotta have patience.
You do
with Brock.
But
all I'm saying is, look, I don't even mind him being on the roster. I just figured, look, if you're gonna name a starter, who should be the guy? Okay, it's Cody Kessler, and we're just waiting for Deshaun Kaiser to steal the job whenever that time is. I just never even expected Osweiler to even be in the discussion.
But I agree with you. So, I don't even understand why he's on the roster. But even if he is, and this is a legitimate competition, why is he sitting above Cody Kessler at the moment? What is there in the two of those? What is there in anything that has convinced them that Osweiler's deserved that job over Cody Kessler? At one point, when the first practice of training camp, Hugh Jackson said that Cody Kessler's getting the first reps out there. He's deserved over this offseason to go out there and be the first guy to take snaps from under center.
Right.
And I think that was true. I think Cody Kessler, from what he did last year, given that he was a third-round rookie who, wasn't expected to start year one, did some things. Like I say, it wasn't. He doesn't look like a guy that's ever going to be a quality NFL starter. You're not expecting him to become the next, even Phillip Rivers, Ryan Tannehill. But he showed enough that you would think, okay, let's see where this ceiling is. It's higher than we probably thought it was, so let's see where we can go. And he hasn't done anything to lose that position from then until now, and yet somehow Brock Osweiler is there.
It's not like he's been great, but compared to the people around him.
Exactly, yeah. So, he may not have played out of his skin, but in no possible comparison has Brock Osweiler done better than Cody Kessler, at which point, how has he jumped him on the depth chart? Just compare those numbers that I gave you a minute ago. Osweiler had a passer rating of, 40-something, I said, when under no pressure at all. Kessler this preseason has a passer rating of 94.1 when under no pressure at all. Now, that's not amazing, but it's 50 points higher than Osweiler.
You're also dealing with an NFL that has no problem somehow, or at least rumor-wise, taking a guy like A.J. McCarron, who the entire NFL has a chance to draft, right? And he goes, 5th round? So the entire NFL got a chance to put a value on A.J. McCarron and say, we think he's a 2nd rounder, we're going to take him there, or a 3rd rounder. He falls to the 5th. And then he goes out, has maybe 1 or 2 good games out of 5, a really poor playoff game. That doesn't look great. And all of a sudden, boom, 2nd round value. I feel like Kessler, who's never going to have a great arm, is never going to wow anybody with his tools. Could you develop him enough? Because his accuracy is really good. People underrate accuracy sometimes. He throws the ball where it needs to go for the most part.
Yeah.
And, he's a little late in the pocket, doesn't have a great arm, all of that stuff, but he's accurate. You could stumble into a few good games if you're Cody Kessler, and then you get some unsuspecting team like, sure, we'll give you your 3rd-round pick back or a 2nd-round pick, and you get some value out of it. That's the way I would play it with Kessler, because in the NFL, it takes 2 or 3 good games before people are saying, yeah, we're going to trade a high draft pick for that guy. He's going to be our future starter.
So here's the thing. I would argue that we've seen as much good quality play from Cody Kessler as we've seen from A.J. McCarron. And yet people are talking about the Bengals won't let him go for anything less than a 1st-round pick or a blow-you-away offer. And the Browns have a guy that's played just as well over a longer period of time, I think. And they're starting Brock Osweiler in front of him.
Yeah, I get it. Or don't get it. But that's where we are right now.
It's because he's only 6'1", 210. It's heightest.
It is. It's those poor short guys. I apologize on the behalf of the tall guys. Deshaun Kaiser, big-time throwcast this week. We will get into his game as well. You'll want to hear that because Zach Robinson trained Deshaun Kaiser throughout the entire draft process. He knows everything about his game inside and out. In the same way we praised Kaiser's game last week, he did just a fantastic job in his debut. Last night, we're recording this on Tuesday, Monday Night Football did not look as comfortable. There were some poor plays in there for Kaiser, so we will break that down. Let's talk about the Browns' defense, though, because this is why you guys are going to jump on the Browns bandwagon, guys. We've got a lot of youth. They look faster. They're more aggressive. Greg Williams does not care that it's the preseason and everybody's rushing 4 and playing cover 2. He's going all-out blitzes, and they're audible and out of plays at the goal line, forcing Geno Smith into interceptions. It doesn't matter. They're going all-out blitz on 4th down. If anything, it's going to be a fun, aggressive defense, and there are players to keep an eye on. Guys like Jabril Peppers, who's playing a little bit more free safety. Guys like Joe Schobert, who was a PFF favorite coming out a couple of years ago, playing middle linebacker, making plays. Myles Garrett, of course, the number 1 overall pick. Talk to me about this Browns defense, Sam. What are you seeing from these guys?
Not just, Greg Williams isn't just sending all-out blitzes. Greg Williams is sending complex zone blitzes with defensive linemen dropping into coverage.
That's his base defense, though, so it's
Last
okay.
night, 3 different defensive tackles dropped into coverage for a total of 5 snaps.
I love it.
Greg Williams has always done some pretty crazy stuff when it comes
Aaron
to
Donald drop it into coverage every now and again.
But he's always done some weird stuff, but in the preseason it's taking it up a notch. Everyone's expecting, vanilla cover 2, and Greg Williams is out there dialing up zone blitzes with defensive tackles dropping into hook zones to pick off passes.
I love it.
I don't think it's just the defense either. I think if you leave the quarterback problem aside, which I think they're going to hope is solved ultimately by Deshaun Kaiser, whether that materializes or not, there's a lot of talent on this roster.
True.
The defense, they've been adding defensive guys in the last couple of drafts. They've got a lot of young guys. Myles Garrett looks legit. And this is from a guy who wasn't the biggest Myles Garrett fan coming out.
Derek Barnett fanboy trying to tell us that Barnett was
I'm still a Derek Barnett fanboy, but Myles Garrett looks significantly better than I thought he looked in college. I think he's a guy now that is going to be a far better pro than he was a college player, and he was a pretty damn dominant college player. So
certainly,
Myles Garrett looks legit. That looks every bit a first overall pick, well spent. But from looking at the preseason game last night, a lot of the guys they drafted a year ago were playing well. Joe Schobert, Mike Renner's favorite, got himself a sack and 5 defensive stops.
Now has 2 sacks and 2 pass breakups.
That's
on
pretty
the season.
good.
Should have intercepted an Eli Manning pass. He dropped it, but he was in good position on
Carl Nassib had a good game, got some good pass rush with a hit in a hurry there. There's a lot of talent in that defense. And then we were saying earlier that they could easily have a top 5 offensive line. Sean Coleman at right tackle had a good game, didn't allow any pressure, over 27 pass blocking snaps, 44 total snaps for him. And the other 4 members of that offensive line are more proven veterans, should be good. When you look at what they've done in
He's
their
kind of
NFL
like Lyle
careers.
Collins, right? With the Cowboys, if you look at the rest of the line, it looks good. If you could shore up that right tackle spot for Cleveland, then you're talking about one of the better lines in the league.
Well, by that logic, they may not even need to do that because he would be the one weak link on an offensive line that should have 4 good starters. So even if it's bad, they should be okay. But if he ends up being half decent, good, anything above that could be easily one of the best lines in the unit in the league. We've been talking about Pittsburgh having one of the best lines because there's no weakness on that line. Man for man, they're not as strong as the Cowboys, who can boast 3 All-Pros, but because there's no weak link at all, it becomes a really, really good unit. That Browns line could end up being a unit like Pittsburgh. When you look at what they can put out left to right, with Joe Thomas still, the new imports in J.C. Treader and at center, and Kevin Zeitler at guard, and then Sean Coleman just has to be decent, average even at right tackle, and that looks like a really good line on paper. And that's, I think, why this Browns team is an intriguing one, because they know that the quarterback is going to be the biggest problem. If they're going to be good, finding that quarterback is going to be the single biggest challenge they have to overcome. So they've been plowing picks into the defensive side of the ball, getting talent, and they've been rebuilding the offensive line so that regardless of who the quarterback is, they're going to have the easiest chance they can possibly give them to do something. And that's another reason, I think, why Cody Kessler is kind of hard done by, because it's not like he has to be good. He's going to have one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. He's got a running game to lean on in terms of Duke Johnson and who's their other running back? Isaiah
Crowell.
Yeah, Isaiah Crowell. Yeah. So they're going to have a running game.
And it should be much better with the offensive line coming together. It should be.
Again, so he just needs to be a game-managing quarterback. And, I mean, that's what he's set up to be.
Look, I'm still looking at the Browns from a long-term perspective. This year, I think they're that tough out. There was a year a couple of years ago where the Browns were that team that was just so difficult to play. I can't remember the exact season. They were just difficult to play week in, week out. They didn't have a ton of wins to show for it. I think that's the team this year. It's going to be they're just going to be a tough out week in, week out. I think DeShone Kizer in his 2 games, if you read the scouting report that I posted on Twitter that came out of our 2017 NFL Draft Guide, all a part of PFF Edge, I think to a T, the scouting report has broken him down perfectly so far through 2 games. He can move in the pocket, he can make special throws, but he can also sit too long in the pocket, take sacks, be inaccurate, everything to a T. Because of that, I don't think Kaiser's locked in as this long-term guy, and I keep coming back to they're not tied to him. So you see what he has. If he hits, great. If he hits, man, he could be a really good quarterback if he could shore up some of those things. If he doesn't, boom, you're right back drafting a first-round quarterback next year. You're in the market for it. It's a deep quarterback class potentially. So I just love the way they're set up because they get all these pieces around it, like you're saying. You might have something in DeShone Kizer, but if you don't, you're going to take another shot at a quarterback in the future as well.
So I agree with you. I think that's the kind of ballpark this team is in this year. We said it before when we did the previews, the AFC previews, that this isn't their year. You know, their year to be really good maybe next year, 2018. We might see Cleveland take the big step forward that we saw from Oakland when they were slowly building.
Right.
But I think the more I think about them, I think this team could be sneaky better than we think they are this year. You know, they might not be a 4 or 5 win team. They might flirt with 500. You know, they might be a 6-7 win team and kind of actually, I mean, the biggest thing going against them is that the AFC North should still be a pretty tough division. So they're not going to have free wins the way some other teams could have as they're getting better. But this could be, you know, a 6-7 win team, not a 4 or 5 win team.
Yeah, when you look up and down the defensive roster, we mentioned Myles Garrett. You have a guy like Danny Shelton who broke out last year, especially against the run. Don't forget they traded for Jamie Collins last year, too, to add that athleticism.
Oh, and Jabril Peppers suddenly playing free safety. Where's that coming from?
Let's talk about Peppers, because we said there's no way that he plays free safety. He's just a box safety, but he's playing free safety, and he spooked Brandon Marshall up the sideline on Monday Night Football.
Well, it was the big question coming out. It was, what is Jabril Peppers? But the question for everybody was, is he a linebacker at like 205 pounds? That can't be possible. Or is he just this box safety? You know, and what can you do with him as this box safety? Can he play the slot? Can he do? But nobody was thinking, is he a deep lying free safety? Is he the next Earl Thomas? You know, but every single snap he took last night was as a deep lying free safety.
And he's still probably not the next Earl Thomas, but
yeah.
Interesting that they're putting him there.
Yeah, but every single snap he played was deep. It's not like he was even doing a kind of versatile jack of all trades deal like Jamal Adams has been in New York with the Jets. He just played free safety. Every single snap was either single high or as part of a 2 high safety shell. Everything was deep. And he showed pretty good instincts. Like you say, he spooked Brandon Marshall, gave him the old alligator arms down the sideline on a pass that regular season Brandon Marshall probably makes a stab at catching, but preseason Brandon Marshall's not having any of it.
I thought it was a preseason business decision for sure.
Absolutely.
But, you know, it's nice to see Peppers getting into position quickly.
The point is,
moving quick.
in regular season, Brandon Marshall probably goes for that, and Brandon Marshall probably takes a lick for doing so. So, you know, the fact that Peppers was able to get in that position and be in the right spot to deliver a big hit after that catch, or in and around that catch is a good sign. I think it's fascinating that the one thing nobody was pegging him for certainly looks like the way the Browns are going to use him.
Let's take a quick look around the league. We'll fly through a couple other quick storylines. Minnesota Vikings, we talked about them on the NFC North preview. And guys, if you haven't listened to our previews, we went in depth on every single team. So I promise your team got hit with a ton of depth, offense, defense, what we think your best case scenario might be, what needs to happen. So go check out all those previews in the archive. Minnesota Vikings, we talked about that defensive line depth. It's been a strength in recent years, but maybe there are some question marks popping up. 2 players that are excelling so far this preseason, Tayshaun Bauer out of LSU and Jaleel Johnson out of Iowa. Quick story on Tayshaun Bauer. We have a new PFF member or employee, Gunther Cunningham. Gunther came by the offices this summer, and he mentioned 2 names to me. And he said, Steve, I've been studying these guys on tape. There's 2 defensive ends that I love. One of them was Tayshaun Bauer out of LSU. The other, Jordan Willis out of Kansas State. Willis, a guy that we were really high on at PFF as well. But both guys performing extremely well for Coach Gunther and his evaluations. What do you think of these guys? Can Bauer and Jaleel Johnson add the depth to just kind of get Minnesota's defensive line and, as to this, big force with a lot of guys that they can roll through there?
So Jaleel Johnson is the one I think he's the important one to focus on, because he's the one that I think the Vikings need to get immediate impact from.
Yep.
Because Sharif Floyd remains perpetually on the shelf, and whether they expect to get him back or not, I mean, his thing seems like a long-term problem. They're going to be moving on from Sharif Floyd pretty quickly, and they would happily take a guy stepping in that shows he can do some of the things that Floyd did as a compliment at the three-tech position to Linval Joseph and his dominant run stuffing. And Jaleel Johnson showed a lot of that the past couple of weeks. He's shown a lot of quickness, a lot of interior disruption, penetration. He got a couple of hurries against Seattle. He got a couple of hurries, or a couple of total pressures, a sack and a hurry against Buffalo. Against Seattle, he got 5 defensive stops as well. It was a real force against the run. But he's a guy that if they can get those kind of snaps from him, they have an open vacancy at 3-tech that they would happily take. Bauer has been phenomenal. I mean, he's got an incredible amount of pressure. Another sack and 3 hurries this week to go with what he had last week. The one caveat being that this was against the Seattle Seahawks line, and the Seattle Seahawks starting line sucks. So their backups, not good.
Do we just I feel like there was a point on the podcast maybe 2 years ago. It was like every time somebody went up against Seattle, we'd say, hey, look at this defensive line breaking out.
Yeah.
And then you'd look back and wait a second, it was against Seattle's line.
That'll work.
That's why.
The Seahawks lost George Fant as well for the season to a torn ACL.
They did, and I hate piling on George. Clearly was not good last year, probably the worst left tackle in all of football. Should not have been playing left tackle for the Seattle Seahawks last year as a former basketball player with such little football experience. I was hoping to see some progress from him this year. So somebody asked me on Twitter, is that the biggest injury of the preseason? It's not.
Yeah.
In theory, it's not, because you'd like to think you could find somebody that will be better than him this year, right?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, a lot of people were treating this as a catastrophic injury for a team. And, there are a lot of players that if you lose this guy in preseason, you've got major, major problems to replace the level of play that he brought you. I mean, Fant, I agree. I don't want to pile on the guy. He's lost the season to an ACL injury. But, I mean, he is the definition of a replacement level player. You should be able to find the level of play that George Fant brought you effectively off the street.
Off the street? How about just Luke Jokel?
Luke
Jokel can go play left tackle as well as him,
There will be guys cut in the next couple of weeks that can come straight in and give you exactly the same level of play as you were getting from George Fant. So, I mean, in theory, losing your starting left tackle for the season in the preseason is a horrible body blow for a team. But in practical terms, given where the level that he was playing at, it shouldn't be a big thing to patch over.
I think on their own roster, Luke Jokel, even though he's not really panned out as a first-round left tackle, could probably play left tackle better than Fant. I think Ethan Posick, who they drafted in the second round, who played some tackle at LSU, but is still more of a center guard type of player, could probably step in and do a half-decent job. I still think Seattle's best offensive linemen, all centers, Posick, Britt, and...
Yeah, but they've already given Britt a shot at tackle, so we can't move him back out there, because that was not good.
Well, no, he's excelled at center, certainly.
Also,
Joey Hunt's the other center that I love quite a bit.
It's worth pointing out that Jokel was terrible this week, so maybe he's not the guy to do it.
Look, I'm not saying that Jokel is great. It comes back to what we've been talking about on the podcast the last few weeks, creeping back toward average. Jokel's at least a step back toward average.
Jokel has never been as bad as Fant was when he was playing left tackle.
Yep,
so.
And that would be a fair way to look at it. One other name I want to throw at you as far as a storyline goes, Manti Teo playing some pretty good football for the New Orleans Saints. I'm not saying that it's been reported that he will start or anything like that, but Teo, middle linebacker position. I did hear that somewhere. Teo with the Saints. Teo's not had a great career. Let's not make any bones about it. I think he was very overhyped coming out of college, ends up going in the second round. Still a guy who I don't think can do a ton in coverage. He's not the best athlete. But the Saints the Saints linebacking core has been a lot like Seattle's offensive tackles and some of these other really poor units through the last couple of years. Anything that's a little bit better than it's been is useful. Can Teo at least be a 2-down run stopper to, help them out a little bit?
I didn't prepare a good joke about a fake girlfriend. Have you got one, or are we just going to roll with this without
We're going to pretend. I mean, dude, that's way in the past.
Oh, I know, but it's never going to leave. There's no way you can get through that in your entire career. That's one of those, you do this once things, and that's what you are for the rest of your life.
Let those who have never been catfished throw the first stone is what I say.
I mean, he had a good game this week against the Chargers. I will say that they made him look an awful lot better by somehow conspiring to leave him unblocked several times.
Well, he's a former Charger. They want to make him look good.
Maybe that's what it is. I mean, we talked about Greg Williams dialing up the regular season stuff for the preseason. The Saints didn't really seem to be doing that. They seem to be showing the Chargers relatively standard stuff, but San Diego was like, this is witchcraft. We can't deal with this. And just collapsed.
They're not looking good right now.
And they were allowing,
so far.
Manti Teo to just run through the offensive line unblocked for a sack. At one point, he made the hardest work I have ever seen out of like an unblocked path to the quarterback. He almost seemed to actively seek out a blocker to then get around, as opposed to just, hang on, there's a big gap here I can run through. That's probably the fastest way to the quarterback.
Looking for contact.
But he did have a good game, and the Saints have no... It's really interesting, though, that Stephon Anthony, who looked like this phenomenal inside linebacker prospect, is now on the roster bubble, likely to be cut potentially.
He just has so many bad plays.
And Manti Teo is the guy that's going to be coming in to play linebacker.
I know.
You're like, I mean, that doesn't make sense. That's the wrong way around.
And the linebacker position has just been so bad the last couple of years, like I said.
A long time in New Orleans now.
Yes. And, the defense, we talked about it on the NFC South preview. If they start, they've added some interesting pieces.
Yeah.
Whether it's Marshawn Lattimore at cornerback, Sheldon Rankins, their first-round pick in 2016. If you start to get those pieces playing better and you just get some solid play at linebacker, it's not a great linebacking core on paper, whether it is Stephon Anthony competing, Craig Robertson, Alex Anzalone, rookie third-rounder, A.J. Klein. So there's not a lot of huge names there. So, look, if they could sneak 400 good snaps out of Teo, I think that's a win. And that's the type of preseason storyline that we're creating here.
Also, weirdly, almost their entire linebacking core is grading well over the preseason. They have 3 of the top 10 graded inside linebackers, not just inside linebackers, off-the-ball linebackers. They have...
Let's blame the Chargers for that
5 of the top 34 graded linebackers. So, I mean, the only guy that isn't grading well is Alex Anzalone, who just appeared to be very grabby. He was Grabby Peters levels of grabby against the Chargers.
Oh, I missed that guy.
In coverage. Every time a guy released off the line, he was just latching on like a limpet and then getting flagged for it. But he's the only guy that isn't grading well this preseason. The rest of them are all solidly in positive terms.
Maybe this is the year for Saints linebackers. We're gonna
10
talk
years in the making. Now they're going to blitz the NFL.
There's another Saints player we're going to talk about. I'm just going to give you a chance to. We're not going to brag. It's the preseason, but I'm going to give you a chance to just, highlight some of the guys that you've liked through the years who are off to really good starts here in the preseason. I'm going to give you 3 names, and you can tell me about them. Devontae Harris, again of the Saints, cornerback, came out of Texas A&M a couple years ago. We liked him. He went undrafted. We had a much higher grade on him. Kalen Reed, Mr. Irrelevant in the 2016 draft, another guy that we thought was more of a top of the draft, top half of the draft type of player, goes late in the 7th round. And then Derek Barnett, of course, who went in the 1st round. But, you were the one, and our grades were saying he's right up there with Myles Garrett, and he's looking really good. Talk to me about Devontae Harris, Kalen Reed, and Derek Barnett all having excellent preseason so far.
The Barnett thing is easy. 1st round pick, should have been a top pick. Like I said, right up there with Myles Garrett. I thought he was a better player than Myles Garrett. I still think there's a decent chance he has a better NFL career than Myles Garrett, even though I'm really coming around quite quickly on Myles Garrett.
Yeah, you got to like Garrett.
But Barnett is just, he has rare and ridiculous levels of bend and dip and ability to contort himself around the edge of a tackle and just generate pressure that way. And it's already happening. You're seeing him generate sacks, generate pressures. You can't
plays
match
the run really well.
Yeah, you just can't match the physical things that he's able to do coming around the corner. Tackles just aren't able to do that. And he's already forcing himself up into the first team, and should, I think, have a much bigger role going into the season than they probably anticipated he would have.
The thing I kept saying during draft season is do not overthink Derek Barnett.
Yeah.
I warned before the combine, don't overthink him. He goes to the combine, supposedly has a hamstring injury, doesn't run well. Same thing happens at Pro Day. So I thought from an athleticism standpoint, he was not going to test well. He did not test well, but I warned before. I said, don't overthink him. It's a little bit like Joey Bosa. Even though Bosa went number 3, there were still people who were trying to say, but, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do that. Bosa goes out, has a dominant rookie season. It didn't matter if he didn't look like a Myles Garrett. I think people want everybody to look like Myles Garrett or Von Miller, right? Yeah. Joey Bosa and Derek Barnett are those two similar guys who don't have that perfect look, but they will produce at a very high level.
But the thing about Barnett as well is that the numbers that were important were good. The 3-cone and that kind of thing.
That's true.
The stuff that demonstrates your ability to change directions quickly and to like dip and bend around the corner, they were good. It was just he didn't run fast in 40 yards in a straight line, at which point, who cares? That's not going to happen. The other two guys are more fun because they're guys. Cornerback, I think, when we've been doing this college stuff, cornerback maybe more than any other position is the spot where there is an entrenched NFL set of biases that is at work, where if you don't fit a specific athletic profile or a specific physical set of dimensions, the NFL really isn't interested in you unless you show them something phenomenal. Right. So unless you're an Antoine Winfield and you just do freaky things against the run that nobody else in the league does, the NFL doesn't want to know about you playing on the outside. You're a slot guy only, and you earn your crust there. But guys like Kalen Reed and guys like Devontae Harris just graded really, really well in college at smaller schools. Well, Harris at Texas A&M, but Kalen Reed at, where's he, Southern Miss? So at either smaller schools or working with smaller physical stature than a lot of these guys. But at some point, you just have to look at what they're doing and say, this is good coverage. And good coverage is good coverage regardless of who you're doing against. Now, Devontae Harris played a little bit last year. It was a lot of up and down, more down than up, if I'm honest. But has looked really good this preseason. And I posted a video of him going one-on-one against Keenan Allen. Shut him down, got a pass breakup, I think, on the play. Now, admittedly, it required preseason levels of letting them play for that to be unflagged. It was
a little bit of physicality.
A lot of physicality involved. Probably a holding call in any other regular season game. But you could say that against a lot of Seahawks games in the regular season. They're not always going to get called. So, and then Kalen Reed is Mr. Irrelevant, as we said. I really liked him as a prospect coming out. He had the physicality. He's not a small guy either. I think he's like 5'11", 210, something like that. It's not, it's not small enough, or not small enough that you would be concerned by it. But he has been targeted a lot this season. I think he's got back-to-back game balls for the Titans.
Team of the week, PFF this week.
Has been targeted 10 times across 2 games, has allowed 20 yards in those 10 targets. That's pretty good when you consider that some guys will give up 20 yards in 1 target.
Absolutely.
Obviously no touchdowns. Hasn't had his pick yet, but has had 2 pass breakups. I think Kalen Reed's a talented guy. They've got a lot of moving pieces on that defense as they try and patch up a secondary and kind of improve. I think he's a guy that could develop in year 2 and actually, be a factor on that team.
Both guys just move extremely well. I thought, Harris's limitations, probably straight line speed. Guys can run away from him, but we watched some of his plays over and over and over again, the way he closed on the ball. So I think if you just use him the right way, use him in off coverage, let him make those plays in front of him, keep him on guys like Keenan Allen, who, Allen's not really a 4.7 guy like he ran at the combine, but he's not that speedster.
You don't need to worry about him running straight by you.
Exactly. So I think in the right place, you can use Harris pretty well. And same thing with Reed. The play that you always highlighted during draft season was his ability to close on the ball so quickly, following a guy in motion. So those little plays stood out, and it's good to see guys like that playing well so far in the preseason. So that'll just about do it for us here after recapping preseason week 2. We've enjoyed this PFF podcast and the expansion of the podcast, guys. A lot more planned for you guys as we go during the season. Multiple episodes. Don't forget, my baby, the Big Time Throwcast, now going to be housed on the Pro Podcast. And we're trying to make sure that you guys are always listening. Be sure to download and subscribe all of our episodes subscribe and rate us 5 stars. And here's why you're going to do it, because we're giving away a free PFF Elite. That is our $200 product. All you have to do is leave the 5-star review, leave a Twitter handle or an email address so that we can get back to you. We will draw a new name every single week. We've been doing this secretly the last couple of weeks. We forgot to remind you. But leave the reviews. Sam, who won last week? We gave away a free PFF Elite subscription, which is like gold.
Yeah, the winner this week was, I don't even know if this is supposed to be pronounced as one word, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. Ton Soyun, Tonsoyun. He is the winner of our free $200 PFF Elite package. And for all the PFF Elite members, we are going to be sending you out again a batch of preseason grades just as soon as our all 22 reviews are locked. We are going to be sending out preseason grades, which will be this week, and the cumulative grades. So who has done, or what grades everybody has got for the entirety of preseason thus far. That'll be a little bonus for PFF Elite subscribers.
That sounds like a steal. We posted it last week in the PFF Elite Facebook group. We've got our own group for the PFF Elite members. Oh man, we're having a ball just interacting with everybody there, and we want you all to be a part of that. If you guys are interested in getting PFF Edge, that is our $40 product. We have multiple ways for you guys to get that for free or for cheap, however you want to look at it. You can go to profootballfocus.com/DraftKings17 or profootballfocus.com/FanDuel17. All you have to do is make your first $10 deposit at either FanDuel or at DraftKings, and you'll get a free PFF Edge subscription. And don't forget, guys, we decided to take all of our products and throw them into Edge and Elite. So whether you're a fantasy fan, if it's just NFL that you're interested in, if it's just the draft you're interested in, it's all rolled into one, and we're just trying to provide great value to you guys. So thanks again to everybody for listening. We will be back later in the week with some big-time Throwcast and our predictions for the 2017 season. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys next time.